We spoke last time about the two of the big issues that there are about the directly related to the Mechirah, the Tabu and Haram Gemiras. And this time about the Sechanem. Sechanem, if you remember, is the thing that the Chazon implies. He says, if not for that problem, he would be saying the Heter b'diavad. He would say that it was okay. And this is the one issue that makes it no good, even b'diavad, that it shouldn't be okay. If you do it the way it's done. If you do it the way it's done. Okay, so I'm gonna before we get into the details, let me explain to you first the question, or what the point of the Sechanem is. The way in my mind it's organized, it's a 4-part question. Okay, the 4-part question. Okay, these 4 parts, you need all 4 of them in order to have the question, and then we're going to go through each one of the parts and see the question, the way people try to chisel away at this from each one of the 4 parts. Okay, and the first part is like this: if I own land and I want someone to sell for me, I want the rabbinut to sell for me, then they have to be my shliach. They can't make a union unless they're my shliach. Okay, that's the first part. Second step is, well, it's also to sell land to a guy. It's an issue of Sechanem. Now it's a land to a guy. And then the third part is, well, if they have to be my shliach, and there's an issue of Sechanem to sell land to a guy, which is what they can do, they're going to sell my land to a guy, then the rabbinut, the people who I'm asking to do this, are shliach aveirah, because they're my shliach to do something that you're not allowed to. And then the fourth part is, well, if they're a shliach aveirah, then they're not a shliach altogether. Well, if they're not a shliach altogether, back to step 1, which is you can't sell land if you're not my shliach. Okay? Well, I'm going to talk about that. I just got started. So I was going to talk about it. So these are the 4 parts of the question. Okay, the question is, they're my shliach. I'm asking them to do an aveirah. In came they're a shliach aveirah, and in which case there's no shlichus. If there's no shlichus, we're back to the start, which is they can't sell the land. Which of course, the Chazon point out, that's great news, because then they're not over this at the rights of Sechanem. They're just over the Yisurim and the Rabbanim of Shemittah, which is good. He said they're much better off that way. He says, but they think that they're getting around Shemittah, and they're not getting around. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through these 4 pieces. Each one of them, again, if any one of those would be missing, you wouldn't have the question. Okay, so the question needs all 4 parts. I'm going to go through each of the parts and say how people try to chisel away at this. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'm not going to tell you that there are, in the first part, we'll start with the first one. Okay, that the rabbinut must be a shliach. Okay, there's 3 ways that I know of, 3 kunsim, or 3 svaras that people have as to how to make the Mechirah without the rabbinut being a shliach. Okay, if they wouldn't be a shliach, then this whole question obviously is going to fall away. Okay, I'm not going to, time-wise, we don't have time for that, but I don't think answer if you want to. 3 ways of getting around this, of doing this, 3 cheshmishpat type ideas of how to get around. What I am going to tell you is the following.
What's the best?
What do you say?
Tell us your best.
The best is the 4th thing I'm going to tell you. The thing, I'm not telling you that, I'm going to tell you something else. And that is like this. What they did is, what they did is like this. It came not this Shemittah, I mentioned this last time in brief. Last Shemittah, the person in charge of the Heter Mechirah was Rabbi Zev Weidman. He was the one who did the Mechirah. He was in charge for the rabbinut to do the Mechirah. So he came up with the following kunz. I don't know who came up. As far as I know, he came up with it. It's his kunz, which is like this. In Eretz Yisrael, the land does not belong to the individuals. The land belongs to this thing called the Minhal Mekarkai Yisrael, the Israel Land Authority. They own 93% of the land of Eretz Yisrael belongs to this government body. Okay? And what they do is, what?
All the time?
All the time. It's their land. If you want to buy a piece of land, what you do is you do a lease. Now, what you do is, if you do a lease, let's say it's they can do 49 or 99-year lease. If you do a 49-year lease, and they say, let's say the lease is $1,000 a year, then you don't pay them $1,000 a year. You give them $49,000 up front. So, to the appearance of it, it sure looks like you're buying it. You're giving them this large amount of money. You're saying, here's $49,000, give me my piece of land. But on paper, that's not what it says. It doesn't say you bought it for $49,000. It says you bought it for $1,000 a year for 49 years, and you're prepaying all those lease payments up front and thing, and you have the right to renew it. Right, they own the dira, but they don't own the land that it's on. The land that it's on belongs to the government, and the government assigned it. We could build diras here. Now, supposedly, the government...
7%.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. But supposedly, the government is not... doesn't follow through on this. In other words, they let you renew it, and they don't come back if you, I don't know if anyone's hit yet the 49 years. They're not like they come after you and say, okay, time for new lease payments. So they in all appearances, everyone has the feeling that they bought it. They don't say, oh, I'm living on a leased piece of land, my lease ends in 6 months. They look at it as, I bought it, this is my piece of land. But the way it's set up is that it's set up as leases. So what they did is like this. So instead of the people telling the rabbinate to sell the land for them, the people said, we're giving back our leases. We're going back on our lease. Government, you can have your land back. Okay, so the government had the land again, and now the government sold the land by itself. The government didn't need to be a shliach of all those farmers.
But somebody's a shliach.
No, because what it is the way to look at it, this is from the things we skipped. The government, whoever's the government representative, he was the one who did the Mechirah.
Okay, but he's the shliach of the government.
No, he's the owner. He's okay, so that has to do with the other things.
Yeah, the government. Who's the government? The government is the people.
Okay, and
the
therefore...
people make him a shliach.
Okay, so I'm skipping parts like that. Okay, there's ways that could. Oh, Rabbi Yishmael's walking. He'll tell us. But there's ways that could. They're the representative to take care of them. So he avoided this. Like, okay, we're going to skip that part. But anyhow, so he said, everyone give back your land. Undo your lease for the year or for a year or two. The government made the Mechirah. And I was saying he missed the first point. He skipped this whole first point, and the whole question falls off because there's not a shliach. He avoided shlichus. Okay, that's what he did in Tafshin Tzamaches. Came this year, Shemittah. New people were in charge of the Mechirah, and they did not want to do it like that. They said, let's do it the old way. We liked it the way it was always until now. So they set it up to be like that. But when they came to sit around and decide to actually do the Mechirah, I wasn't there, but they tell me that the people from the Israel Land Authority, the people from this government body said, last time the way they did it was much better. We liked it. I don't understand how they convinced them, but we liked it much better than the way they did it last time. Let's do it that way. Okay? So they switched it. So they decided, we're going to do it this way, and we'll do it, even though the rabbis at the table didn't want to do the Mechirah that way. They said, let's do it the traditional way that we just do Shelichus. They said, we're going to do it now.
Yeah, but the farmers didn't agree.
That's a good question. I said to them, that what happened? I was it. Their Star HaShos. The Star HaShos.
The Star HaShos should have said it.
The Star HaShos says, if you remember from last time, it says you can do it however works best. So I guess they took advantage of that and said, oh, you meant is you want to return your lease if that's what the rabbi wants from you. So somehow they went along. Okay.
Well, look at the companies, you start Mechirah.
Okay, call it that way. Okay, so this was an idea. This was a creative idea of how to avoid this whole cycle that we're talking about, the Sechanem, because there was no Shelichus in the first place. Now, it also, before I tell you the problem, it solved another issue. Okay, which
doesn't it raise another issue?
Which is
again, the Israel Land Authority supposedly will be shutfus of all residents of Israel and all Chayes. I don't know what you want to do. And maybe some people are not asking to sell the property.
Well, the government does it. Well, the government there's someone in charge who makes decisions all the time. Should we build apartments here? Should we give this for farms? That whoever that's appointed, he's the mamuna to make those decisions. So if you may not like that they're make alternate side street on you. Parking on your side, too bad on you. There's someone in charge who makes that decision. But it solved another problem. Okay, it solved the problem, which is that I didn't see anybody talking about this, but it solved the problem, which is if the yid who owns the farm doesn't really own his farm, he only leases the farm. When he says to the rabbis, "I want you to sell my land," okay, he said, "I want you to sell my land." He doesn't really mean I want to sell my land because he doesn't own anything. He really means is I want you to transfer my lease to the non-Jewish person. Okay, well, transferring my lease to the non-Jewish person doesn't take off the din of Shemittah. Why does that take off the din of Shemittah? The land
it's transferred back to the government.
No. I'm not talking about before this. I'm saying this idea solved a different problem, which is if you do the Mechirah in the traditional way, which is you say we're selling it to a guy. Guess what? We just found out you don't own it. So how can you sell it to a guy? You don't own anything. So when you say sell. In Eretz Yisrael, the word sell doesn't mean sell. It means it's transferring of my lease rights. So if I transfer my lease rights to you, well, how did I get away with the din of Shemittah? So now the guy has the rights to pick the fruit of this field, but what does that do anything? But the field still belongs to the Yidden. Okay, so this idea brought out the point. I don't see anybody talking about this, but it brought out a point which is: wait a second. Maybe you can't even do it the other way. Doing it the other way may not help the Mechirah, may not make a Mechirah because you're not selling anything. You're just transferring the rights to the lease of this land, but the Yidden still own the land. Okay? It's reminiscent of something Shachta speaks about from Moshe Salvation, about a problem that a whole cheshbon, that maybe nowadays you don't even have a right to sell land for a different reason. Other cheshbon is why not let's sell the land. Klal Yisrael owns it and individuals don't own it. Okay? It has like a din of Yerushalayim. But so this idea of how to sell for giving it back through the leases at least solve the problem from that way. Now, the Rav Kook does mention once in passing that there's Shittas that Kinyan Paris is Kinyan Guf, and it could work, and if I sell you my Kinyan Paris, that would take off the din of Shemittah. He says, B'di'evet, maybe it could be Samach on it. But Rav Kook lived before the days... He was just talking about it just stam. But he lived before the days of Israeli land authorities. You know what I mean? The Israeli land authorities are a little older than I am. Just, you know what I'm saying? It's not, hasn't been around forever. So in his days, you could really sell it. He took that Kinyan Paris because he had ways to other ideas of how to do the Mechirah. He says, but yeah, you could be Samach on it. But I don't see anybody talking about it that, wait a second, you can't sell the land. I'm saying this new way of doing the Mechirah has that big advantage. Okay? Has this advantage. Okay. They used to do the new way has this advantage that now you don't have this problem. Seemingly, this made me realize that we had a problem 2 Shemitahs ago. The farmer said to the rabbi, sell my land for me. So the rabbi can't sell the land because the farmer doesn't own the land. When the farmer says sell, he means is transfer my lease rights to this land. Well, transfer my lease rights means doesn't take away from Jewish ownership, so it's still chayav in Shemittah. So how did I get it out in Shemittah by selling my lease rights?
Actually selling. So
they're selling it. The mamish selling it. Good, so they have a right to sell. Okay.
Anyway, everybody should have to do it. You want to do it only this way. You might want to do both ways, but everybody should have to have the Israelites involved.
That's what I'm saying. I'm bringing up that once they came up with this patent, I didn't know about this whole this government body, this whole way they have the government. But once this was brought up, it should make people realize. Wait a second. So what's with the old way? How did we solve the problem? So I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Okay. The general question is the sale through Los Sechanem. It's still a valid sale.
I didn't get to it.
No, I know, but
okay.
When you make it, if you're over this on Los Sechanem,
I'm not going to talk about that. Okay. I'm not going to talk about that. No, I'm not going to talk about that. No. I know what he was.
You're risking if the guy himself does it.
I know, so I just want because you're transferring that you're making an issue there's no problem with Shelichus being invalidated. But okay, fine, but it's a sale valid.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about that. I'll talk about that afterwards. Okay, so that's like an adjunct to the question. Okay, so but you remember last time that even though we have milas to the sale, the real milah they were trying to get was that there's no shlichus. The second advantage that I'm pointing out to you is that it's actually sold instead of just being leased. But I mentioned to you last time that there's this weakness to this whole system, which is it makes the harama that much greater. Okay, it's all of a sudden the government body charged with overseeing the land of Israel and making sure it's used properly is all of a sudden selling it out to some not Jewish guy. It makes the whole thing even more preposterous. The harama that much greater when you're selling it, as opposed to individuals who sell their land. If I sell my land, it's within reason that I want to sell my land to this person. To think that we're all selling it, it makes the harama that much more. That we mentioned last time. Okay. So that was the first point. Is there ways to avoid shlichus? Okay. The second is there's an issue of Lo Sechanem. That's the second point. The second part of the question is there's an issue of Lo Sechanem. Okay, so a few different ideas were suggested as to how to avoid it. It seems to be insurmountable. And what is like this?
What is in the game is one of that? If you're all like a Chaim Kohen, there's no necessary to solve it.
There are people who talk about maybe Lo Sechanem nowadays is only Rabbanan, and maybe if it's only Rabbanan, maybe it doesn't make this. It's not. Kashrus is not that. Okay? There are people who talk about that because maybe it's only Rabbanan nowadays, and maybe that doesn't have shlichus aveirah issues. Most people did not assume that way. I wasn't even going to mention that one. Okay. So one answer is like this. When the Torah says Lo Sechanem, the Gemara says that it means a few things. Okay, and the two of them that are important to us for right now is Lo Sechanem means you can't give a matnas chinam. Okay, the word Sechanem comes from the word from chinam. You can't give a guy a present just for nothing. And the other is what we're talking about, which is Lo Sechanem. You can't give them chaniya. The word chanim comes from chaniya. You can't give them a foothold, a place to live in Eretz Yisrael. So there are those who said, well, the din is on the first din. When we say you can't give them matnas chinam, the din is if the matana is not chinam, if the matana is for your benefit, then you're allowed to give it to them. Okay? If somehow giving them a present benefits you, then that's okay. It's only also if it's matnas chinam. So they said, well, just like that interpretation of Lo Sechanem is only when it's chinam, so too the second interpretation is also only when it's chinam. But what happens if I give him chaniyah b'karka that's for my benefit, or said a different way? It's actually to benefit the yishuv of Eretz Yisrael, to give the yidden chaniyah b'karka, then it doesn't apply. The only answer, just like in the first way you're understanding it, that if an issur to give matnas chinam is only when it's for their benefit. But if it's ever for my benefit, I'm allowed to do it. So to the second way is also only if it's to their benefit, not if it's for my benefit, then I'm allowed to do it. And over here, of course, the sale is to my benefit. The guy gets nothing from it. He pretends to own the land. I get the benefit of not having to keep Shemitah. And the Mechirah,
what's that such a shot?
Yeshua Cutler, Yeshua Smalker, Yeshua Cutler, and the Shalom Basic also. But of course, Kashrus says, what are you talking about? He says, I don't get this. He says, it's because it comes from the word matnas chinam. It's because that said, don't give a present for free. But if you're doing it for your benefit, then you're allowed to. But what's the second one? The second one is no shaychus. What's the shaychus? Okay, that's an obvious question. I get it. But that's one way of saying no. There's no issur of Sechanem if it's to your benefit. Okay, another is. Okay, there are those who want to say that the issur of Sechanem only applies when you're selling the land to people who are of the aveirah zarah. Okay, it comes from the Sechanem, and but this is how it progresses as follows. Okay, the Torah says in Shemittah, he says in the din of matnas chinam, he says you can't give a matnas chinam to a guy. I'm sorry. He said you can't give matnas chinam aveirah zarah, but you could give it to a ger toshav. Okay, so the Mechirah says, there's a question. How do you read this? The first line sounds like it's not separate lines in the Torah, but the first line sounds like it's only for people who are the aveirah zarah, which would flow from the psukim afterwards that talk about that they're going to teach you to be aveirah zarah. He says the first line sounds like it's only for the aveirah zarah. The second line says it's only mutter for a ger toshav. Okay, a ger toshav means someone who's makabel zay mitzvahs b'nei noach in front of a bezdin. So he said if the first one is mashma, it's only for the aveirah zarah. The second is mashma, the heter is only for ger toshav. Well, which one is it? So the Mechirah says don't worry about the ratio. The ikar is that it's mutter for a ger toshav. It's not mutter for a guy who's not over that aveirah zarah. No such cool mutter for a guy over aveirah zarah. The Torah said it just now. He said that. There's an interesting point here. I didn't put on the screen, but the Bach brings this question, and he says, I think the Mechirah's question is a really good question. I think it's a really good question. And the Achronim who say, you see the Bach holds that there's no issur of Sechanem to a guy who's not over the aveirah zarah. Because he says, you see, the Mechirah says good question. And he leaves it like that, like it's a good question. Okay, so they bring the Bach as one of the Mekilim. There are many Mekilim, but there are Bach who's Mekilim to say there's no issur of Sechanem to a guy who's not over the aveirah zarah. The only thing is, if you look in the newer edition...
No.
I'm not saying it. Just pause a second. Wait a second. I get there. But if you look at the Bach in the newer tours, okay, you find out that they actually censored out that the Bach didn't just answer the question. The Bach gave an answer also, but the censors took it out. The censors took it out because his answer talks about how the Goyim play around with the words in these svarim and this and that. So they censored out the whole answer. But once you see the answer, you find out that he holds like the Mechirah also. Okay, he doesn't really hold like he doesn't argue. In the part that in the old tours is just has the question.
It's probably only from
okay. So the Shulchan Aruch is clear that the issur of Sechanem even applies to people who are not of the aveirah zarah. Okay, this level of Sechanem gave matnas chinam. But if you take two steps and you say, first of all, we're going to argue on the Shulchan Aruch, and we're going to say the issur of Sechanem or matnas chinam is only for people who are of the aveirah zarah. And second is, we say, even though this kula is in Yardea by matnas chinam, it also applies to the other din of giving them chaniyah b'karka. That's also only for people who are of the aveirah zarah. If we say those two things, then there's no issur of Sechanem. There wouldn't be any issur of Sechanem to sell it to an Arab. Okay, with the assumption that the Arabs are not of the aveirah zarah, which there's good basis for that in Poskim. With the assumption that they're not of the aveirah zarah, there would be no issur of Sechanem because because the guy's not of the aveirah zarah. Yes.
So why don't you make a ger toshav?
Okay, so that's because you must miss it. You missed it here. You missed it. I'm going to show you something there. You missed it because there's no ger toshav when there's no yervel. Okay, I'm about to show you something about it. There's no yervel, so you can't have a real ger toshav. Now, what I just said, it's only going to some people. You have to assume not like the Shulchan Aruch by matnas chinam. The Shulchan Aruch says the first, even if the guy's not over there, even if he's not over there by the zarah, you're not allowed to give him a matnas chinam. And so not only do you have to argue on the Shulchan Aruch about that thing, you have to also say that it applies to chaniyah b'karka, which doesn't say that. It only says about it in matnas chinam. Do people even talk about it?
You're suggesting maybe chaniyah b'karka what?
Would not apply to people who are not over there with the zarah.
Oh, it's better, more clothing.
Right. Okay.
More clothing, more clothing. You can't do.
No. Okay. The Shulchan Aruch says you can't. it applies to people who are not Avdei Zara. If you argue on this Shulchan Aruch, and you say it applies to even Chaniyah B'Karka, then you'd be allowed to sell on Arab land. Okay, now, wait a second. So what they did is like this. It came up this year, in this year's Mechirah, which is like this. This year, I don't know what they've done in the past, but in this year's Mechirah, they did not sell the land to an Arab. Okay? The land was not sold to an Arab. The land was sold to a person named George Streichman. Okay?
Sounds Jewish.
He's from the Ukraine. He lives in Eretz Yisrael because of the law of return. He has a Jewish grandparent. He talks Hebrew. And he's a Noahide. Okay? He's one of the people who keeps his Aymitzvahs B'nai Noach. And he keeps them, not only does he keep the Aymitzvahs B'nai Noach, he keeps them because he believes in the Baruch Shalom. As the Rambam says, if you do it just because you're a moral person, it doesn't work. He keeps them because there's a whole cult, a whole group of people who believe in, who do the Zayim Mitzvah, who keep the Zayim Mitzvah because they believe in the Baruch Shalom. And they have even Yidden who teach them. What?
Well, the guy who Indiana Jones is based off is a bit.
There we go. Okay, so the
shame aveirah. Starting
is that what they call it? Okay, so they got this person, and they said the thinking was they might as well get someone. Well, first of all, you figure if they get this guy, he's probably a little bit more pleasant and sit better in the news than if you're putting the guy in a big kafir that we sold from the land of Eretz Yisrael. So this guy sometimes what? Right, the barefoot guy in the kafir. Okay, but this guy somehow seems more pleasant to put on, but also. He's not exactly Ger Tosha, but he's warming up towards this Heter, which is, they may not be learning Sechanem to a person like this. Now, what you should just know, I'm going to show you a video in a second, but what happened was, you're going to see in the video, bring your popcorn, you can see in the video that when they sold it to him, they used the words Ger Tosha in describing him, and the people, the B'nai Noach, these people who keep their Zayim Mitzvahs B'nai Noach got all excited. They say, the Rabbanah changed their mind, and now they're being Makabel Ger Tosha, even though you're not allowed to when there's no Yovel, the rabbis changed their mind. Whoa, we're about to become Ger Tosha, we're going to have new status. These are people who, they believe the same Shemaim, they believe in the Baruch Shalom. So they said, we're going to become Ger Tosha, we're going to have status in Klal Yisrael, because they're going to be Makabel Ger Tosha. Look, they took George as a Ger Tosha. Right? So they were all excited.
Shabbos good.
Until they can't use them as Shabbos. They can't. Now talk about Rabbi Shabbos point. It's Issa D'Oraisa now, right? Different time. So anyhow, they said we wouldn't be Benedish. So they quickly quieted them down and told them you should just know guys, they're not Makabel Ger Tosha. You should just like a Ger Tosha. No one told them you should just know the end, which is if we'll ever be Makabel Ger Tosha, then we can't have the Mechirah either. Because when Makabel Ger Tosha means we have Yovel. Once we have Yovel, then Shemittah D'Oraisa, and we said we can't have ahead of Mechirah than they have. So that's like so they didn't tell them that part of it, which is if we're ever Makabel Ger Tosha, we won't say anything. Yeah. So this is what you're about to see is the Mechirah. Okay, this is the Mechirah. This year's Mechirah. This is a video of this year's. If I can get it to work, I don't know if you can hit the second. That's the chief rabbi. He just mentioned that he came to Issa D'Oraisa.
That's yours, the picture.
שאתה יודע שיש אלוקים בעולם, קודם כל נתחיל מהחלטת מועצת הרבנות הראשית, שבהתאם לחוק עסקות במקרקעין, והתקנות שהותקנו בעקבותיו, תקנות עסקות במקרקעין, תשל"ח.
That's the takana that you're allowed to sell land without a taboo.
מועצת הרבנות הראשית בישראל, או מי שהוסמך מטעמה אחד. מועצת הרבנות הראשית בישראל מסמיכה לעניין זה את הרב יעקב אריאל, שליט"א רבי רמת גן, ואת הרב אברהם יוסף שליט"א, רבי כולון וחבר מועצת הרבנות הראשית בישראל. חתימת יד נשיא מועצת הרבנות ומזכיר המועצה, ובוודאי אני מוסמך.
And they're the people from the Israel Land Authority doing the Mechirah to him. They don't look like the rabbis on the other side of the table.
Where's George?
He's with a purple shirt, pink, or whatever color. He speaks Hebrew. If you wait a second, he speaks. He waits it in a second. Get that in a second. Okay, so that was the Mechirah. Okay, that was the Mechirah. That was not easy to get them to do. You should just know. But anyhow, so they sold the land to him, and that was they're trying to this Heter to maybe say since he's not over the way to Zara. I told you, but after that video came out, the people up there got really excited because they I don't know if they used the word Ger Tosha, but they took that the Makabel Zayim Mitzvah in front of the Bezdin Rabbani and a whole thing, and they got all upset. Okay, now one more thing I'll tell you is another time why there should be no Sechanem is they say maybe the Chinuch says there's no Issa of Sechanem unless you do a permanent sale. if you're listening, they said they're only selling to him for 2 years, which is what they do. They do the Mechirah for temporary, and therefore there's a Shita, the Chinuch says that there's no Issa of Sechanem if you give him a temporary living in their zone. Most people don't hold that, but that's what the Chinuch says. So they try to be, there should be no Sechanem, because you're not giving him Chaniyah. Chaniyah means like permanent foothold in Eretz Yisrael.
So doesn't that raise questions about the Mechirah?
Because
they're by Kingdom Paris, Kingdom's money.
No, so they do a real Mechirah. I don't know. Okay. There are other tziruf I'm not following you. Okay. Other reason why they might go to Sechanem. We have to move on because I'm never going to make it. Okay. The third thing was, okay, maybe.
When do they sale?
What did you say?
When do they do this?
Right before Shemittah. Like a few days before.
Because there's only certain up here.
Oh. No. Oh, you mean the people planting right before Shemittah? There's certain Yisrael that's like not on their head. They have the bigger problems with that. Okay. So now the third is. So we come so far is the Rabbanut has to be Mashliach. Yes, let's assume there's an Issa of Sechanem. Does that mean is that now the Rabbanut is a Sheliach of aveirah? Is it true that the Rabbi Lau that was sitting there is a Sheliach of aveirah, or the guy on the other side of the table who actually did the Mechirah, is he a Sheliach of aveirah? So the first part of this is, in point number 2, we just said is that there's all kinds of ideas why it might not be Sechanem. Obviously, if there's no Sechanem, then you're not a Sheliach of aveirah. Right? That sort of goes together. Okay, but that has a second clinch to it, and that is as follows. What's the reason why ain't Sheliach of aveirah? The Gemara says the reason is because Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, Divrei Mishamin. He says so. Taisa says, since the whole reason is, I don't expect the person to listen to me. If I think that it's mutter to do it, if I think that it's not an aveirah what's going on over here, then there's no Divrei Rav, because I and the Sheliach fully expect the guy to listen to what I'm saying because we don't think it's an aveirah. So that means to say is, even if in truth it is an Issa of Sechanem, let's say the truth is all those svaras are wrong and it really is an Issa of Sechanem, but the farmer and the Rabbanut believe that it's not an Issa of Sechanem, they believe in all these svaras, why it's not Sechanem. So even if you don't believe in it, they do. And if they do, then it's not a Sheliach of aveirah. Sheliach of aveirah means that people have to think, has to be an aveirah. The conversation has to be through an aveirah. They don't think it's an aveirah. So even if it really is an aveirah, that doesn't make a difference. What's important is what they think if it's an aveirah. That's one way of getting around it. Okay, I can get that. I'll skip that if you want. You don't have to say mummer. I don't have to go Rabbi Lau. Mummer. You know, but the Ramah says. But the other guy, he was also bringing yarmulke. But the Ramah says. What you mean to say is that the Ramah says is, since the Isser is, since the Svara is Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, if the person is muhsik to do this aveirah, he's a person who does this aveirah all the time, then there's no problem. Because again, there's no Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud, because I know he's going to do it. I expect him to do the thing. So if he's a person who does this all the time, he may not be a mummer, but for this thing he does it all the time, then it's okay. So again, even if the din is that it is like Sechanem, but the Rabbanut's been doing the Mechirah for 100 years. So I fully expect him to do it. There's no Divrei Rav, Divrei Talmud. That's a little weaker. It's a little weaker because it's not the same guys, you know. It's not Rabbi Lau, it's not the chief rabbi in Tafshin Samches. Okay, so we're saying is, well, that office, come on, the people in that office always do this aveirah, so I can be samach that they're going to do it. So that's debatable whether you should say the office always does that aveirah, as opposed to the Ramah's cases, the guy always does the aveirah. Okay. One other thing is that there are those who say like this. The Shtar HaShah says the Rabbanut can sell the land whoever they want to. Whatever works. Whatever they think is the right thing to do, that's what they should do. Excuse me. So, that means is, if the Rabbanut would have decided that they want to sell this land to a Yid, they can sell it. I looked at the Shtar again. Doesn't say in the Shtar HaShah that they can sell it to a guy. It just says they can sell it. So, there's a Mishnah that says, if you have a Shelichus, which is either for aveirah or for mitzvah, and the Sheliach chooses to use it for an aveirah, that's not a Sheliach of aveirah. So over here, the Rabbanut had the permission. My Shtar HaShah says you could sell it. Doesn't say you have to sell it to a guy. And therefore, it's not Sheliach of aveirah. Because it's not Sheliach of aveirah because I don't have to sell it to the guy. I can sell it to whoever I want to. Now, of course, the weakness is over here is that do you think that I just told them to sell my land for nothing? It says on the top of the paper, you know, it says Shemittah Tafshin Ayin Hey. I mean, it's pretty obvious that I'm doing this for Shemittah reasons. It doesn't do any good for Shemittah if you sell to a Yid. So, what do you mean? I gave you the right to sell. Let's say they would sell to a Yid. Let's say they go ahead and they would sell to the farmer who lives next door to me, who decided he wants to buy a piece of land. They would sell it to him. What would happen? Wouldn't everybody say, come on, that's ridiculous? Let's say they sold it to my next door neighbor. Forget about Shemittah. He wants to buy it. He said, I won't want the whole Shemittah, and I'm going to keep this guy's piece of land. You think that's going to work? I mean, you think that's going to go? Doesn't everybody know that it's only for Shemitah? Well, to sell for Shemitah, you have to sell to a guy. Doesn't it help to sell to a Yid for Shemitah? Isn't it obvious that I mean sell to a guy? So they're saying, well, I have the rights to sell to a Yid. You have the right to sell to you. Your right to sell to a Yid, that's not what your Shelichus is for. Okay, now, but it brings up a question, which is, instead of doing Rabbi, what's his name? Whiteman's idea, they could have had a different way to solve the problem. They could avoid this whole Shelichus issue by saying, let all the farmers give the Rabbanut the right to sell their land. Let them all sell to one Yid, no longer Sechanem for there. Let them sell all the land there sell to one Yid, and then let that Yid sell to the guy. So the Shelichus of the aveirah is when the Yidden sell to the guy directly. Why don't they structure the Mechirah as, again, Rabbi Whiteman said, let's give it back to the Israel Land Authority. Okay, it seems to me there's a simpler way to do it. Let all the Yidden sell to Rabbi Lau. Not that he make him give him Mashtar Hashah. Give him Mashtar Hashah to sell to someone, so he'll sell to himself or to his brother, and then that Yid will then go ahead and sell to the guy. So that seemingly that should have been an easier way to solve the problem. I wonder if that has to do with with the Harama and Gemir Stas kind of questions. Again, if one person would own all that land, to think that he really means it, maybe that would make questions like that. But seemingly we could have avoided the Sheliach aveirah by doing that, by having the Shelichus. They're bringing from a Mishnah Melch. The Mishnah Melch says, since I could sell to a Yid, that makes it not a Sheliach aveirah. I'm saying is, why don't they actually do it that way? Why don't they actually sell to a Yid? And then let that Yid sell to the next guy. There were 10 people around the table. One of them should buy all the land, and then let that guy. I mean, now that guy is carrying a big peckle. I mean, he's now going to be responsible for the Sechanem of selling all of Eretz Yisrael, you know? But okay, if he feels comfortable, then he should be able to do it. Okay. And the last is, we're doing really good. Time-wise, we're doing well. Okay. Much better than I thought. Okay. And the last is, assuming that the Rabbanut is a Sheliach, and there's an Issur of Sechanem, and there's a Sheliach of aveirah, then the last point is that it has to make the Shelichus be bottled. This fourth point is the one that has the most, I can use the word history. Okay? This is something that's talked about in Poskim. Okay? This is not new to the Heter Mechirah. A lot of this other discussion is, so to speak, new for the Heter Mechirah. People are bringing up these non-popular shittas to try to justify the Heter. But this is a more traditional shiloh, and that is, when a person makes someone a shliach, and it's a shliach of aveirah, does that make the shlichus be bottled? Okay, that is to say, if I ask someone to be mekadosh me a lady who I'm not allowed to get married to, so then it's ein shliach of aveirah. I do not get a punishment for the fact that I was mekadosh this lady because ein shliach of aveirah. He did it, not me. But does that mean that the kedusha is not chal? Does that mean is that he wasn't a shliach, or just does it mean is I'm not responsible because he's the one who did the wrong thing, not me? But so I might not be responsible for what he did, but did the act actually get accomplished for what I was trying to do?
Or you're a shliach to be megarish your isha ba'al.
Right, that's what comes in that case. That's great. That comes in that case. So the Taisa says is that the shlichus is bottled. When ein shliach aveirah means that the shlichus is bottled, and that the person was never a shliach in the first place. Okay, it's not a shliach at all. Okay, this is was a big issue. As Reese mentioned, was a shiloh about a person whose wife did not want to be mekabel or get, so he wanted to be mekarisher. So he sent a shliach to bring her a get. That was the story. He sent a shliach to bring her a get and to give her the get bakarcha. So it was a shliach of aveirah. He was sending her to give a get bakarcha. So the shiloh is the shlichus batal, is the shlichus not batal? And the Neg Yehuda brings many shittas. There's lots of Jews, and even in the Sefer, Jews from other people about back and forth about the Shiloh. The Yehuda says the Shelichus is bottle. Okay, the Chazon Ish thinks that that's correct. That's correct. That the Shelichus is bottle. In which case, then that's the end point of this whole question, which is since there's Shelichus aveirah and the Shelichus is bottle, therefore there's no Mechirah at all. Others, the Nesivos and many others, disagree. And they say, no, you just don't get a punishment, but the Shelichus is not bottle. Again, according to those people, if you say the Shelichus is not bottle, so there was a Shelichus aveirah. According to those who want to feel like that, it's a shlichus aveirah, but it doesn't make a difference. Let it be a shlichus aveirah. So okay, I sent him to do a shlichus, it was a aveirah, and what happened? Nothing. So he did the wrong thing. The farmer doesn't get punished. The only one who gets punished is the rabbi up on the screen over there, or the guy on the screen. He gets punished because he did the Sechanem. The farmer doesn't get an aveirah, but it wouldn't stop the Mechirah from happening.